Department of Justice's IG report on FISA abuse comes out today. Impeachment closing arguments on Capitol Hill. The Afghanistan papers. Lying about the border and banning porn. That and more coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. It's quite a day in the swamp, quite a day in D.C., up on Capitol Hill and down right near where I used to live, actually, at the Department of Justice. You have a bunch of major political stories that are playing out today. Let's first start with and as I go to air here, we are a little bit ahead of the Inspector General report release. So here's my preview. Here's what I think is going to be in the Inspector General report. So this will be fun because we may actually have this. I can fact check myself later on in the show and see if I am correct. But I have a sense of how these things tend to go, and those of you who listen to the show know I also tend to be right, which is fun. Here's my preview of the IG report. They're going to say things like the following in it. There were some irregularities and insufficient vetting procedures. The Steele dossier played a big role. They need to review best practices and set up a commission. No systemic bias or criminal conspiracy, however. Bottom line, the takeaway, bureaucrats always protect the institution. That is what they do. Even ones who do not necessarily have a partisan or deeply ideological motive in the sense of Democrat versus Republican, they protect the institution because they believe in it, because they work for it. Remember, this is an internal Inspector General report. This is somebody from within the institution itself. This is the DOJ being told to go wash their own laundry. And what a surprise. They'll say, sure, there were some minor grass stains, a bit of ketchup, a little mustard, but no real problem here. There's nothing. The garment is not ruined, if you will. I know I'm belaboring this analogy, but you understand what I mean. There's no way that they will view this as a systemic risk, a systemic problem. Keep in mind, this is my prediction. I'm going hard on a prediction early on here in the day because I'm very confident that that's the case. There will not be any specific disciplinary measures except perhaps for the individual who was a lawyer who worked for DOJ who allegedly changed some of the information in one of the emails presented to the FISA court. But there'll be nothing severe. There'll be nothing all that serious. I want to ask you this, though, and this will be the case no matter what is presented in this Inspector General report. Why would an FBI agent mislead the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, the secret court that allows for spying on individuals, violating regulations, risking his career and reputation, unless there were some really compelling ideological motive behind it? The problem we have come across here many times is that there's always the ability, when you're discussing things like bias and abuse of power within the government bureaucracy, particularly, you can always just say, well, mistakes were made, but they were just human errors. Nobody really sought to do anything to derail a presidency here. There was no criminal conspiracy. There's no deep state. There's just hardworking bureaucrats who sometimes make errors. This is a storyline you've probably heard before. This will remind you of other things you've been told. Journalists, for example, say this. They say this about all the mistakes they have made, particularly about the Trump administration. They say, well, when we get a story wrong, it's not that it's fake news. It's not that we think that we should be telling the public things that are damaging about this president because that's our real duty. It's just we made a mistake, man. It happens. Except all the mistakes go in the same direction. They're anti-Trump. How many stories have had to be retracted that were in any way positive or perhaps provided some degree of exoneration or explanation for President Trump? I think you all know the answer to that. So the journalists tell us that the motives behind their fake news, the motive behind the fake news is not that they hate Trump. It's that people make mistakes, that there are errors that occur. Okay. And then beyond that, you could look at, we may never know the motive in terrorist cases. Now, that tends to be the media line only when it involves Islamist or jihadist terror, or in the rare but still very real occurrence of a left-wing radical who, say, tries to engage in a mass assassination of members of Congress on a baseball field in Alexandria, Virginia, not long ago. We may never know the killer's motives, they will say. And we never really find out. Even in situations like the Pulse nightclub shooting, where you had an individual who was calling in to the FBI and saying, this is why I am doing this. Here are my motives. Well, but we may never, maybe those aren't his motives. Maybe he's trying to mislead us. You can play this game all day long. You can play the we'll never know the real motive dodge as long as you want. Why would an FBI agent risk his career, his reputation, or a DOJ official, or any of the above, to get a FISA warrant against somebody in the Trump campaign unless they were ideologically inclined to do so? They will not have a real answer for you about this. They will not be able to tell you why this is the case. They'll just say that mistakes happened, mistakes were made. But all the mistakes that were made in this process that resulted, by the way, in the firing of James Comey, who should have been fired, even Rod Rosenstein agreed with that one, resulted in Peter Strzok being fired and losing his job, Andy McCabe being fired and losing his job, fired for cause, by the way, not fired because the president just wanted a better person in the role. Lisa Page demoted and removed from a certain team within the FBI, and also you have Bruce Orr, I believe, removed from one of the cases he was on. I mean, there are sanctions being taken against individuals at the very highest level of the DOJ and the FBI. Not a single one of those people is anything other than an anti-Trump partisan. It's very obvious from their text messages. See, we know what they think, and we know at some level what's in their hearts when it comes to this president. That's already been established. But then when they take actions that are only able to be explained based upon that motivation that you would take from somebody hating President Trump, they say, oh, but there's no bias. We went through this in a different direction with the Hillary Clinton email investigation. At every step of that process, Hillary Clinton was given tremendous latitude, soft glove treatment. Nobody really wanted to push too hard. Nobody wanted to find out too much. Let her lawyer, who's also a witness, sit in on the deposition. Don't try to ask any tough questions. Don't try to trip her up into lying under oath. I mean, none of this. And all of the people involved in that, by the way, at the highest level, were the same people involved in laundering the Steele dossier to get a FISA warrant against the Trump campaign, pretending that some rumor intelligence, some chatter in a bar in the UK with George Papadopoulos, who nobody had heard of before that moment, that's enough to get a full field investigation open, spending who knows how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars just in the first opening weeks, sending FBI agents on this, overtime, travel, man hours, all this, based on something that some foreigner said, one of the Trump campaign's low-level staffers said, which, by the way, was a rumor that was flying all over the place on the internet. I mean, this would be like someone saying, hey, I heard this guy say that Epstein didn't kill himself. He must have inside information about that, so we better investigate him. Lots of people are saying Epstein didn't kill himself. In fact, the $150,000 banana duct tape to a wall down at Art Basel, my bad, whatever, close enough. That was replaced by somebody writing on the wall, Epstein didn't kill himself. I don't think that the person who wrote Epstein didn't kill himself had inside information. But if you're willing to pretend to be stupid because you want a certain outcome, there's a lot of pretexts that you can use. The problem that we're seeing isn't just that law enforcement at the highest level of the federal government was used as a weapon against one political party, the Republican Party and President Donald Trump. What we are seeing is that just as the media bias that existed for so many decades was a result of people in the media and at the highest level believing that they weren't biased, they were just presenting the truth. They're not Democrats, they just always somehow think Democrats are right. You have this now with senior law enforcement officials who believe that the system and the apparatus and the people who are the experts, whether it's on Ukraine policy and the State Department officials who are testifying there, or FBI, DOJ folks who believe that Donald Trump is some grave risk to the Constitution, they think that their judgment on those matters is more important than the good faith execution of the laws and the usage of the powers they are given by the American people. Powers, by the way, that actually, once the people have given them to the executive branch, emanate from the top down, from the president on through. This notion of a hashtag resistance from within the executive branch should be deeply troubling to anybody who really believes in our system of government. But people just think Orange Man bad. They hate Donald Trump so much that nothing else matters. And in fact, you're seeing that play out right now on Capitol Hill, and you will be seeing this in the Inspector General report. Do not expect the bureaucracy to clean itself up. It will not happen. I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you in advance of when that Inspector General report has come out. We all know it's going to be just a few moments, really, I think, before this is out and about in the world and everybody can read it. And I will read it as quickly as I can. I think the chances that I will have to dramatically amend anything that I've told you are very slim. So we shall see how Buck's powers of prognostication play out. We shall also see how the impeachment proceeding plays out.
Before I had the great honor of being a counsel for this committee, my young son asked me a question. He said, "Dad, does the president have to be a good person?" Like many questions by young children, it had a certain clarity, but it was hard to answer. I said, "Son, it is not a requirement that the president be a good person, but that is the hope."
That is Barry Burke, who was on Capitol Hill this morning as I was washing down some Black Rifle coffee, delicious stuff, and getting my day going. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this guy, and I thought, you got to be kidding me. They're really going to do this thing where they say, my child asked me that, Daddy, why is it that the Republicans are not respecting the separation of powers as evidenced by Section 17_3 of the United States Criminal Code as shown by Adam Schiff in a hearing, Daddy? I just want to know. Why do they keep using kids as props? Democrats, stop doing this. Kids are great, especially your kids, those of you who are watching or listening to this. I don't care what kids say about politics. There's a reason why parents are in charge of children and make decisions for them. Everything from what time to go to bed to what to eat to whether they've had too much ice cream. The correct answer is there's never really too much ice cream, is there, Producer Brandon? But whether it's the elevation of Greta Thunberg as this apocalyptic cult figure, which is what has happened in the world, and it's appalling, and people who believe in this are not very smart, they are not wise, they are not knowledgeable, they do not have any sense of history or judgment, but there's lots of them. Millions and millions of them, and some of them are multimillionaires who work in the media getting paid a lot of money to be propagandist idiots. But then you also just have this Democrat, it's a trope, it's a meme, it's something they can't seem to stop. They can't settle this down. My 7-year-old asked me, Daddy, why does the president speak in the American vernacular in such a way that there's salty language emanating from his lips when really we know the founding fathers believed that virtue in a leader is essential? I'm pretty sure your 6-year-old didn't say that, lib. Stop lying. They do this all the time. Not only are they lying about the conversation. This is the classic. This is like the old Tom Friedman thing. I had a cab driver who said, jihadists go all the way, whereas moderates only go half the way. This is the creation of people say or sources, right? To make it seem like the narrative is emanating from somebody other than the author, other than the writer. And so we have to sit around and pretend that there is some honesty and some truth in this, when we all know it's absurd. And beyond the absurdity of the falsifying of these discussions, which happens routinely, and liberals are the ones who do this. I do not see conservatives ever say, you know, my 10-year-old was waxing philosophical on the impeachment process and really struck a nugget of wisdom. I mean, no! I don't. Libs, listen to me. I don't care what your kids think about Trump or politics. There's a reason why they can't vote. There's a reason why you get to tell them when it's time to turn off the cartoons and go to sleep. And this is why their obsession, though, with presenting their ideas through vessels that cannot be attacked without the attacker being a bad person. Using either youth or victimhood as a shield for ideas that are just flimsy, stupid, and should be rejected. Whether it's David Hogg, who's an adult now, so we can say whatever the heck we want, or Greta Thunberg, who's 16, so we still have to be, okay, maybe, we can refer to the idiot adults that follow her around like some kind of end-of-the-world Dalai Lama. And now you have this. This is a guy who's counsel for the Democrats. It's hard to believe that they really think that this is an important way to spend the American people's time. But they're making these closing arguments, and they have this MSNBC lawyer who's a clown and a jerk, and they have this other guy, Berkey or Burke or whatever, and he doesn't know anything about anything. And here we are. Here we are. Being told the same things we've been told for weeks. I try so hard not to waste any more of your time on the impeachment situation than we have to, but we are being dragged through this. I mean, as a country, we are being forced to endure this silliness. And it's also deeply troubling. I mean, it's troubling that Democrats saw Nancy Pelosi's histrionics last week, and there were people writing editorials about how that was a powerful moment. I think the so-called conservative for the New York Times, David Brooks, Nancy Pelosi's I don't hate him moment and the power of it. Nancy Pelosi has zero principles that are in line with any traditional Christian teaching. Nancy Pelosi is a fraud. But Democrats like the pretense that she's such a good Christian. She would never hate Trump. Who can believe this?
I want to be absolutely clear. The integrity of our next election is at stake. Nothing could be more urgent. The president welcomed foreign interference in our elections in 2016. He demanded it for 2020. Then he got caught.
They're already doing it, friends. Preparing for Trump to win in 2020 and preparing the excuse for why he won. They're letting you know right now that they have no intention of accepting the 2020 election results. And here's the fun part. They're also going to claim that while they're doing that, Trump has no intention of accepting the 2020 results. So they will accuse him of doing the exact thing that they are themselves, in fact, doing. This is what the libs love to do. This is what you're seeing from Nadler. This makes liberals feel better about things. Because no matter what happens, Donald Trump didn't really win that election in 2016, and he won't really win that election in 2020. It's not possible, you see. It's already tainted because of his request to get information from a foreign counterpart about an area where there is, in fact, very real concern about corruption. This has been a battle of narrative and framing of an issue, dishonestly framing an issue when we're talking about the way the Democrats have done it from the very start. For example, and just in case you were wondering, I have to take a pause on the framing issue because I want to point this out to you. Jerry Nadler's really talking about the 2020 election. I mean, this is a common theme now, that impeachment is necessary for the 2020 election. This is what the Democrats are telling you. unless this president is impeached, and one would think removed from office. Remember, impeachment is not their goal, at least from a process perspective. They are voting for impeachment. Every Democrat in the House who casts a vote for impeachment is saying the president of the United States should be removed from office. So the only way for these House Democrats to believe, the only thing that they can tell the public that would justify calling the 2020 election free and fair would have to require the removal of this president from office. If you extend this to its logical ends, what they're telling you is there is no way for there to be a fair election in 2020 if Donald Trump is allowed to run. He's already requested that foreign interference, they say. He's already gotten foreign interference in 2016 from Russia. And therefore, running as an incumbent is an unfair advantage that he never should have had in the first place. This is where we are, my friends. We see it all coming. I feel like I should just sit here. We should create some kind of a backdrop or a chart of what the Democrat war game is for 2020, because it's not hard to see what's coming. It's not hard to see how they're going to lay all of this out. Producer Brandon, would you please play Jerry Nadler and Chuck Todd, clip 2 here?
I don't know. The president, based on his past performance, will do everything he can to make it not a fair election. And that is part of what gives us the urgency to proceed with this impeachment.
The president will make sure it's not a fair election. That's why we have to impeach him. This is now the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee involved in the sham, hoax, garbage impeachment of this president, destroying in so many ways centuries of understanding of the Constitution and of the system that we have and what should rise to this level. Remember, there was no question about what Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton did stuff that was illegal, committed a felony. Felony. That's what he did. So, I mean, you could say that you want to ignore the felony, but it's not like they had to manufacture something. It wasn't hard. But here we are with Jerry Nadler telling you, and I want you to understand that this is not exaggerating their case or making it seem like they're crazier than they are. This is the reality. Jerry Nadler is telling you that the president of the United States must be impeached and therefore should be removed, because you don't vote for impeachment. You vote for censure in the House if you want to just say, bad boy, you've been naughty. The president of the United States must be impeached and removed from office because he has already told us that the 2020 election won't be free and fair. The 2020 election will not be legitimate. Now, there's understandable reason for the Democrats to be worried about the 2020 election. The people that they are putting forward are clowns. They are ridiculous. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. It was all fun and games for the left-wing loons to talk about free this and free that and free everything. But then when you see Sanders and Warren and these other individuals held up to even the most minute scrutiny, they fold because of math and reality, which are difficult things to overcome. Not impossible, as we've seen in so many immiserated socialist societies all over the world. I think immiserated is a word. Am I pulling a Don Lemon by not knowing if the word is a word? I don't know. I think immiserated is a word. If it is, it's a cool word. And that I just introduced to everybody here on the show. Sometimes it just comes flying out of the brain, Producer Brandon. I don't even know. Because I just read stuff, and then it gets stuck up here. And that's why people like to make, occasionally I say a word that I've never heard, but I've read, and I know what it means, and then it'll just come out of my mouth. And they're like, that's not how you say it. Well, okay. I learn as I go. The illegitimacy of the 2020 election, though, my friends, this is where we're heading. This is what we're heading toward. They will not accept it. And they're terrified that Trump is going to win. The economy right now is so good that if you told me that this was going to be the state of the modern American economic system for the foreseeable future, like for the rest of my life, if you're going to tell me that we're going to have this level of wage growth, this level of unemployment, the stock market where it is right now, which please don't listen to this silly Democrat talking point about how only 20% of people or 15% of people are invested in the stock market. You, if you have a job, if you work for a company, if you own a home, the market affects all of these things. All right. Remember 2008? Did things feel good? Did you feel good in your job, even if you owned not a single share of stock? No, because there was economic catastrophe unfolding. And they always tell you it's because of Wall Street greed. Wall Street greed played a role in that. But the truth is that government regulation, mostly for the purpose of social justice, created. That was the underlying foundational issue within the housing market, and a bipartisan desire to put as many Americans in homes as possible, even if they couldn't afford them. But that is, in fact, another conversation for another time. We have learned nothing new in the last 2 weeks about any of this impeachment stuff, which is pretty amazing. But I wanted to take issue with this point that you keep hearing, that the facts are not in dispute. There's a phrase or a version of a phrase that you keep hearing in order to justify the sham that the Democrats are putting this president through. After a 2-year-long special counsel investigation that was just a get Trump operation run by wild-eyed partisan Democrats who, if they could, would have prosecuted the president's children, would have put his senior advisors in prison. I mean, these people wanted to go all in against Trump, and they did everything they could to tear down his presidency, to ruin him, to ruin his advisors. They sent 30 people with long guns in SWAT gear to go arrest Roger Stone for making a Twitter quip and lying about it. I mean, it's an absurd police state, tyrannical crap from these liberals. And they had 2 years of the special counsel to tear down the president. Didn't work. Because Trump, and look, I understand he's not perfect. There are things about this president that, I wish would change a little bit, although he did retweet yours truly this morning. Boom. But he's amazing in many ways, too. And his ability to endure and stare down this machinery of the establishment and never Trump and the psycho left is superhuman. It is his superpower. I don't know how anybody else could do this. I don't know how they could have their family in jeopardy this way. People say, oh, Buck, but he could always pardon them. Not if it's state crimes, by the way. His family members have no immunity. I mean, if they could go after one of his kids, they would. If they could lock anybody, they turned his lawyer against him. They went through his lawyer's files. That's rare. That's so rare. It's not that it never happens, but how much more scorched earth can they get? They grab President Trump's lawyer's own files. They flip the guy against Trump, and guess what? His own lawyer didn't have the goods on him. They keep doing everything. They keep ripping the top off of this and saying, aha, now we've got you, and there's nothing there. What do you mean? Nothing happened. He didn't do anything. They keep trying, and I have to wonder, at what point do they get so desperate that they just entirely manufacture something out of whole cloth against the president? They fabricate something. And I'm not saying that has happened yet, although we're getting pretty close, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened at some point. Oh, no, the media is above that. Oh, you mean like when Dan Rather used fake National Guard documents to throw a presidency? Oh, Buck, he didn't know. Maybe he didn't want to know. That would be in keeping with what we see from the libs. Circling back, though, for a moment to this, to the narrative, to the beating heart of the impeachment charade, right? There's the center of it right now on Ukraine. Keep in mind, now they're going to throw in Russia. And I told you they were going to do this. They're going to have to bolster the case. But you have to wonder, if there are articles of impeachment that relate to Russia, why didn't they just file those right away after the Russia report? Why do you have to wait for Ukraine too? Because it was a weak case. We all know this. If you have a strong case, if you have somebody nailed on a charge, right? If you've got somebody on, money laundering charges, you don't sit around and wait on the money laundering charge until you also get them on a parking ticket, right? So why did they sit on Russia if that was a serious? Because it's not. But here's the beating heart of the Ukraine issue. Here's what they tell you, that the president used his power for personal gain, and that he solicited foreign interference in an election by, and this is what really drives me insane, by asking or by demanding dirt on his political rival. You see, that is a false narrative that is baked into all of this, that is at the very basis of what we're seeing happening. Because what the president did is said, can you get answers for me about something that is a legitimate line of inquiry for a president of the United States, executing his function as the chief of the executive branch. That's it. He's allowed to ask a foreign counterpart. Joe Biden does not have special immunity from investigation because Democrats want to put that, crazy old malarkey express guy. And I couldn't think of anything to do with malarkey there, but Democrats think that he's their best chance to win the presidency. But there's no special statute. And by the way, there's no ethical guide that says that you can investigate Joe Biden. So that's why this is where Representative Mark Meadows, he's taking the buck line. More conservatives, more Republicans, listen to me. Stop with the quid pro quo. And, that's tangential. The key here is that he was allowed to make that ask, and the ask was not illicit. Please play clip 4.
Well, one, he didn't do that. I don't agree with your premise. He talked about investigations. If you look at the transcript, I think he said, will you do us a favor based on the United States going through a lot, talking about 2016 elections.
He's allowed to ask for the information. I've told you what my red line would be here. They are acting as though the president demanded the production of false information to smear a political rival when he asked for clarity on a legitimately reported on issue that anybody should start to ask the question, does anyone think that Hunter Biden's situation there was okay? This is the hill Democrats are going to stand on and defend? Hunter Biden getting $50,000 a month while his dad is running policy in that country? No one thinks that that's just abjectly disgusting? Of course it is. Do you see any outrage being expressed about that, though, in the media? Any of the absolute frauds at CNN, do they show any disgust or disdain over that? No. He did nothing wrong, they say. Nothing. No, that's not true. What he did may not have been criminal. We don't know because there has not been a thorough investigation to the standards of the current administration, and they're allowed to make the ask. I'm glad that Mark Meadows gets it. I'm very frustrated with all these people with the quid pro quo, quid pro quo. Don't play the game the Democrats are playing. Play the reality game.
We have a very rock-solid case. I think the case we have, if presented to a jury, would be a guilty verdict in about 3 minutes flat. And, all this nonsense about hearsay evidence, there is considerable direct evidence.
He got a guilty verdict in 3 minutes flat. Notice how he didn't say about what. And when he says things like guilty verdict, that sounds like a criminal trial. There's no crime. There's no crime they could even charge. The president did not break the law. They don't like what he did. That's not the same thing. This would be like saying, yes, we could prove to a jury, we could get a jury to understand that Friends is a better show than Seinfeld. Producer Brandon disagrees, but that's okay because producer Brandon is wrong sometimes. That's not something that you could prove one way or the other. It does not matter. It's not a crime. It's not about what the jury would decide because you haven't even alleged that there has been a violation of law. What is the violation of law here? They changed every day with what the bumper sticker version of what Trump did wrong was supposed to be. Remember, my favorite was that it was a campaign finance violation. They saw, what did we try before? What did our little lackeys at MSNBC and CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, all of which are hashtag resistance media organizations, what did they put forward as the initial reason why Trump should be impeached? Oh, that's right, a campaign finance violation. That's why and that's what they tried to go with because it was to make an ask about something where you got no information in return and you're interacting with a foreign counterpart. You have a thing of value. I mean, this is something that a first-year law student might try to make a case about and would be laughed out of the room by anybody, not even with a law degree, just anybody who's not a complete imbecile. And that was what they were going with. And then it was bribery and extortion and abuse of power. And, they just keep changing and shifting all the time. They really just hate this president, and they have a psychosis, and they refuse to deal with that constructively. So what they do instead is they drag America through their psychosis, also known as this impeachment proceeding. It is absurd.